Most privacy videos tell you to read the terms and conditions, use a VPN, and stop oversharing on social media. I'm not going to do that today. Instead, I want to talk about something almost nobody explains clearly: the actual rules that govern what companies are legally allowed to do with your data, and why most people misunderstand their own rights so badly that they give away protections they already have for free. Welcome to Cyber Safety Brief, where we explain simple cybersecurity advice for everyday Americans. Quick note before we start. This video is based on authentic, legal, and publicly available cybersecurity and privacy information. Everything here is for awareness and protection only. Nothing in this video involves hacking, unauthorized access, or anything illegal. We're talking about your rights, the rules companies have to follow, and practical steps you can take starting today. Here's the belief I want to challenge right away. A lot of people think privacy is something you have to fight for on your own, that companies are basically free to do whatever they want with your information, and your only real defense is to be careful what you post. That belief is outdated. In my opinion, it's actually the biggest reason people feel powerless about privacy. The truth is, in the last several years, real legal frameworks have been built specifically to give individuals control over their own data. Most people just don't know these protections exist, so they never use them. So today, instead of giving you another "use a VPN and turn off location services" video, I'm going to walk you through how data privacy and compliance actually work, what companies are required to do, what rights you already have, and how to use that knowledge practically, whether you're an individual, a parent, an employee, or a small business owner. Let's get into it. Point 1. Privacy isn't a feature, it's a legal obligation. Here's something that surprises a lot of people the first time they hear it. A growing number of companies aren't protecting your data because they're being kind. They're doing it because they're legally required to. Let me explain simply. For a long time, privacy was treated like a nice-to-have. Companies would write a long terms of service document, you'd scroll past it, click, "I agree," and that was that. But over the past several years, governments at the state and federal level have started passing real data privacy laws. These laws don't just suggest good behavior, they require it, with actual penalties for companies that violate them. Here's a real lifestyle example. Imagine a retail company that collects your name, email, purchase history, and browsing behavior. Under newer privacy laws in several U.S. states, that company may be required to tell you exactly what data it's collecting, give you the option to request a copy of it, and in some cases, let you ask them to delete it entirely. If they ignore these requests, they can face fines and legal consequences. What I personally think is that this shift matters more than people realize. We've moved from a world where companies had almost no obligations toward your data into a world where compliance is now a real legal category, meaning a business has to prove it's following the rules, not just claim it is. So what does this mean for you practically? Safe steps you can take. Look for a privacy policy or your privacy rights link on websites and apps you use often. Most companies are now required to make this accessible. If a company operates in your state and collects meaningful personal data, you may have the legal right to request what they have on you. Treat privacy policies less like boring legal text and more like a map of what a company can and can't do with your information. Let me know in the comments if you agree with this. Have you ever actually read a privacy policy, or do you just scroll past it like most of us do? Point 2. I have nothing to hide. Misses the real point. This is the myth I mentioned at the start, and I want to slow down on it because I think it causes more harm than almost any other privacy misconception. A lot of people say, "I don't care about privacy because I have nothing to hide." Here's the problem with that thinking. Privacy was never really about hiding wrongdoing. It's about control. It's about who gets to decide how your information is used, shared, sold, or stored, and for how long. Think about it this way. You might have nothing to hide from your bank, but would you want a stranger to know your exact account balance? You might have nothing to hide about your daily routine, But would you want a stranger to know exactly when you leave your house every morning? Nothing illegal is happening in either case, but most people would still say no thanks to sharing that. In my opinion, the real issue isn't secrecy, it's leverage. The more data a company or platform has about you, the more influence they have over what ads you see, what prices you're shown, what content you're served, and sometimes even decisions like insurance or lending in indirect ways. None of that requires you to have done anything wrong. A practical, real-world example: many apps quietly collect location history even when you're not actively using them. On their own, none of these data points seem dangerous, but combined over time, they can reveal incredibly personal patterns: where you work, where you worship, where your kids go to school, even your daily habits. That's not about hiding something. That's about not wanting your life mapped out by default. Safe defensive steps. Review app permissions on your phone, especially location, microphone, and contacts, and ask yourself if each app actually needs that access to function. Use built-in privacy dashboards that most phones now offer to see which apps are accessing your data and how often. Remember that limiting data isn't paranoia. It's just good information hygiene, the same way you wouldn't hand a stranger your house keys just because you have nothing to hide. Point 3. Compliance exists to protect you, not just businesses. Here's a phrase people hear a lot but rarely understand: data compliance. It sounds like boring corporate language, something only lawyers care about. But I want to reframe it, because compliance rules exist largely because of you, the individual whose data is being collected. Compliance basically means a company is following specific legal standards for how it collects, stores, processes, and protects personal data. These standards often include things like telling you clearly what data is collected, securing that data properly so it isn't easily exposed in a breach, and giving you ways to control or remove your information. Here's a simple, real-life example. Suppose a healthcare provider's patient portal experiences a security incident. If that provider follows proper compliance standards, they're required to notify affected patients within a certain time frame, explain what happened, and outline what steps are being taken. That notification isn't just good customer service. It's often a legal requirement. What I personally think is that compliance rules are one of the most underappreciated tools an everyday person has. Most people assume that if a company gets breached or misuses your data, you have no recourse. That's often not true anymore. Many of these laws come with enforcement mechanisms, complaint processes, and in some cases, the ability for individuals to take action. What most people underestimate is how much power exists in simply knowing your rights and asking direct questions. A company that's genuinely compliant should be able to answer basic questions like, what data do you have on me? Who do you share it with? Can I have it deleted? Safe steps you can take. If you're ever notified of a data breach involving your information, don't ignore the notice. Read it carefully and follow the recommended steps, like monitoring your accounts or placing a fraud alert. For services you use regularly, banking, healthcare, major retailers, check whether they publish a compliance or trust page explaining their data practices. If a company seems evasive about explaining what data they collect, treat that as a red flag, not just an inconvenience. I would also like to know your opinion. Do you think most companies actually take compliance seriously, or do you think it's mostly checkbox behavior? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Point 4. Your browser and devices are quietly negotiating your privacy for you. This one tends to surprise people. A lot of the privacy protection happening today isn't something you actively do. It's something your browser, phone, and operating system are doing on your behalf, often without you realizing it. Modern browsers and devices increasingly include built-in privacy tools, tracking protection, permission prompts, data minimization settings, and transparency reports. The problem is, most of these tools are either turned off by default or buried several menus deep, so almost nobody finds them. Here's a practical example. Many browsers now offer a feature that blocks third-party tracking cookies. the small files that let advertisers follow you across different websites to build a profile of your interests. If that feature is enabled, a lot of that cross-site tracking simply doesn't happen. If it's not enabled, you're often being tracked far more than you'd expect, even on sites that have nothing to do with each other. The way I look at it is, privacy settings shouldn't require you to be a tech expert, but until companies make these settings the default, the responsibility unfortunately falls on us to go find them. Safe, practical steps. Spend 10 minutes checking your phone and browser's privacy or security settings. Look specifically for tracking protection, ad personalization, and app permission controls. Turn off ad personalization where available. This usually limits how much of your activity is used to build an advertising profile. Periodically review which third-party apps have access to your email, calendar, or social accounts and remove the ones you no longer use. This single step, spending 10 minutes in your settings, often does more for your privacy than years of cautious posting habits. Point 5. Small businesses are often the most exposed and the least aware. This point is especially important if you run a small business, manage a team, or handle customer information in any way. A lot of small business owners assume that data privacy laws only apply to giant tech companies. That assumption can be costly. In many cases, if your business collects customer names, emails, payment details, or even basic contact forms, you may already fall under certain privacy and compliance obligations, depending on your state, industry, and the volume of data you handle. Here's a real lifestyle example. Imagine a small local business that collects customer emails for a newsletter and stores payment information through an online checkout system. If that business doesn't have basic safeguards, like secure storage, a clear privacy notice, and a defined process for handling customer data requests, they could be exposed to both security risk and legal risk, even without intending to do anything wrong. In my opinion, this is one of the most overlooked areas in cybersecurity education. Big companies have compliance teams and legal departments. Small businesses usually don't, yet they're handling the exact same type of sensitive data. Safe defensive steps for small business owners: create a simple, honest privacy notice that explains what customer data you collect and why. Clarity protects both you and your customers. Use reputable, established platforms for payment processing rather than building your own systems, since established providers usually have stronger built-in compliance and security measures. Limit data collection to what you actually need. If you don't need someone's birthday or home address to sell them a product, don't ask for it. Have a basic plan for what you do if customer data were ever exposed. Even a simple one-page response plan is far better than figuring it out during an actual incident. I don't think this is about being paranoid. I think it's about being prepared, especially because customers are increasingly aware of privacy issues and will judge a business based on how seriously it treats their information. Point 6. Your rights usually include more than you think. Let's bring this back to you personally. Depending on where you live and which company you're dealing with, you may already have rights like the right to know what data a company has collected about you, the right to request a copy of that data, the right to ask for it to be deleted, and the right to opt out of certain types of data sales or sharing. Here's the part most people miss. These rights usually aren't automatic. You often have to actively request them. Companies aren't going to volunteer to delete your data or stop sharing it unless you ask, because frankly, your data is valuable to them. A simple example. Many companies now offer a "do not sell or share my personal information" option, often found at the bottom of a website. Most people scroll right past it, but clicking it can meaningfully reduce how your information gets shared with advertising and data broker networks. What most people underestimate is how effective these small, legal actions can be when used consistently. You don't need technical skills. You don't need to hire a lawyer. You just need to know the option exists and actually use it. Safe steps you can take starting today. Look for "do not sell my info," privacy choices, or similar links on websites you frequently use, and opt out where it makes sense to you. If a company offers a way to download or request your data, consider doing it occasionally. It helps you understand exactly what's being stored. If you ever want data deleted and a company makes it unreasonably difficult, that difficulty itself is worth noting and, in some cases, reporting through the appropriate consumer protection channels in your state. So let's bring this together. Data privacy and compliance aren't abstract legal concepts that only matter to corporations and lawyers. They're tools that exist specifically to give you control over information that belongs to you. The mistake most people make isn't being careless online, it's not realizing these protections already exist and choosing not to use them. In my opinion, the future of online safety isn't going to come from people becoming cybersecurity experts. It's going to come from people understanding just enough about their rights to ask the right questions and make small, consistent choices. Checking a setting here, opting out there, reading one notice instead of ignoring it. If this video helps you understand online safety more clearly, like the video and subscribe to Cyber Safety Brief for more simple cybersecurity advice. Stay alert, stay informed, and stay safe online. Before you go, comment below which tip from today you think most people ignore: the privacy settings, the opt-out links, or the small business compliance steps.